Well, good afternoon, and I want to welcome you back once again to the Fireplace Show, sponsored by CVC Success Group. And if you've watched our past episodes, this is a consumer-based question and answer show. Now, today, the subject matter is something that a lot of people don't understand. And like I promised, I'm going to bring subject matter experts onto this show. So when you watch it, it's not just going to be Jerry. There's going to be other people that are going to be on this with me. And today I've got a really special guest. This is a guy that I've known for quite a few years. And I brought him on here because he understands some things about our subject matter, which today is creosote and soot that's produced by wood burning. So my guest today is a gentleman by the name of Stuart Karonovich, and I hope I pronounced that right, Stuart. So Stuart works for a company called Saber Systems. And Saber Systems markets, sells, and manufactures a lot of products. But some of the products that they manufacture are for creosote treatment and creosote removal. So Stuart, let's start out. Tell them a little bit about yourself and how you got into working at Saber Systems.
Well, this is the second career for me, and I've been working at Saber Systems for the last 17 years. I was lucky enough to be introduced to a guy that you guys probably know named John Meredith through my brother. John actually attended my brother's church. My brother's a pastor, and he asked me if I'd like to come to work for him, and the rest is kind of history. I am now a regional sales account manager for Saber Systems and their lead tech. And I love to talk about creosote and how bad it is and what we can do to mitigate it.
There you go. And so you'll know, you may not know who John Meredith is, but if you're in the chimney service business, John Meredith is a really special person to myself and Stuart and a lot of people. John has been very instrumental in my life, and I think I've been in his life also. So Stuart, remember, we're talking to consumers, so when we talk about, I just want to let them know what a phenomenal guy that John Meredith there is. So Saber Systems, you're located in Richmond, Indiana, and if I remember right, if my history is right, John used to be a chimney sweep. Am I correct, Stuart?
John was a firefighter who became a chimney sweep, who became an inventor and a business owner. Yes.
Correct. So I got to know John around 1987, 89 era because John brought out some waterproofing products that were used in water repellents in the chimney industry, which was his first product. And he went to market with Chimney Saver. Now, over the years, what's happened is John and Saber Systems has developed other products, and we're going to talk about those today. Now, Stuart, y'all make a lot of products like stains and waterproofing and water repellents and those type of things, but today we're going to concentrate on the creosote products that you sell. We're going to talk about creosote, which is a byproduct of burning wood, but some years ago, y'all made a purchase of a company by the name of ACS, I believe. Was that the first company that y'all absorbed and started selling creosote treatment products?
Actually, we've only ever bought two companies in the history, in the 40-year history of our company. All the other products that we make, over 150, I believe now, we actually invented. But the first company that we bought, both companies that we bought were in the creosote removal category. The first one we bought was Creoway.
Okay, I'm sorry, it was Creoway first, and then you bought ACS, and both of these were recognized, and we're going to talk about how you use these chemicals today, because a lot of people are under a misunderstanding and think that these chemicals can clean the chimney, and we want to identify that today, the purpose of these. So as you went through this, at this point in time, Stuart, y'all have bought two companies, ACS and Creoway, but you've also developed a product called PCR, which is used by professional chimney sweeps to remove a certain type of creosote from the chimney, which was developed by Saber Systems. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's what it can market as, PCR. So we're going to talk about this a little bit today, but the first thing we want you to understand is, what is creosote and why do we have creosote? You see, creosote and soot are very similar compositions, and they are the byproducts of burning wood. And the reason we have soot, we have creosote is because of the moisture and the other ingredients that are burnt in wood. You can't burn the chimney, the stove, the fireplace hot enough to completely obliterate these in the combustion chamber. Stuart, you're agreeing with what I'm saying at this point?
100%, Jerry. 100%.
Okay. So creosote it's a byproduct of burning wood. But what happens is the lower the temperature is in the venting system, the more severe creosote that we have, and the cooler those flue gas temperatures are. I want to dispel a couple of wives' tales. People will say, well, you can't burn pine because all you're going to get is creosote. Well, from the background in this industry, and I got a lot of years, I can tell you people that burn seasoned oak, seasoned hickory, they can have tremendous issues with creosote if the temperature is too low in the venting system. Stuart, you with me so far? You agree with what I'm saying?
100%, Jerry.
Okay, so what we got to remember is, and to combust wood at a temperature that's high enough to get rid of these pollutants, this combustible material, we have to keep the temperature up, believe it or not, above 1100 degrees. 1100 degrees, which is practically impossible in a wood burning system to attain those types of temperatures. So as a result, when you burn wood in your fireplace or in your wood stove or whatever, or boiler or furnace or whatever you're using, creosote is a natural byproduct that once the temperature drops below a certain point, is going to form in the chimney. Stuart, are you in agreement with me so far of what I'm saying?
I am in 100% agreement, Jerry.
Good. Now, when we have creosote, what we have here in the chimney service industry, we identify creosote in 3 different forms. And we may call it a class 1, a class 2, a class 3. Other people may say it is a level 1, level 2, or level 3 creosote. But what this does, this identifies the type of material that the chimney sweep finds in the chimney. And if you're cleaning your own chimney, you probably find the same type of material in your chimney. And to describe what this is, when we talk about a class 1, I'm going to call it by class here. This is like a soot. This is a fine powder, commonly found in fireplaces, because fireplaces have a lot of air coming in that keep the smoke moving through. So in fireplaces, you're going to see a lot of soot, unless you're a person that has a lot of smoldering fires, or you close those glass doors down, because what this is doing is it's slowing the velocity of that smoke that comes up into the chimney system. And so dependent upon is the temperature in the venting system of how we have creosote built up. Now we have a class 2 creosote, and a class 2 creosote is kind of a flaky creosote. Think of it, if you look down the chimney, think of it like potato chips, possibly. What would you describe a class 2 creosote as looking like, Stuart?
I think that's a pretty good definition, Jerry.
Okay, so think of it like potato chips adhered to the side, and if you run your hand down it or a chimney brush, a lot of that just simply falls off very easily. That's what we would call a class 2. It has some moisture into it, but it's not a severe creosote buildup. Now we have what we call a class 3 creosote. Now the class 3 creosote, to give you the best answer to this, is think of roofing tar. Think of looking in a chimney and someone has taken roofing tar and painted the inside of your chimney with roofing tar. This material is extremely flammable. It contains a lot of energy into it, and when it burns, it can burn with a velocity. What would you add in about creosote in a class 3 form, Stuart?
Looks like a black mirror.
That's a good case. And so tell you a little story some years ago, because I like to tell stories, but I tell them on myself. So Stuart, I don't know if you ever heard this story, but back many, many moons ago, when I was a much younger man, I started cleaning chimneys. And the thing is, I had no idea what I was doing, Stuart. I just went out there. I had bought my chimney sweep equipment. And I had run an ad in the paper, and I was turned loose on the population of Concord, North Carolina. And I'm a chimney sweep because I got my top hat now, okay? So I went to a house, and it had this thing in the fireplace. Now, they never told me about this, but this was in the early 80s, and it had this steel box in there. It's like, what is this? August West never told me about these steel boxes. Well, it was heavy. I got up on top of the chimney, and I looked down at Stuart, and this chimney was coated, and it was like black and shiny. I mean, it was like black glass in there. And I thought to myself, I said, Seth, that must be some kind of super coating they put on these flue tiles to prevent problems or something. I'm serious, Stuart. That's what I thought, because I'd never been to any education. I'd never been through any classes. And that time I still put a brush in there and I brushed it. It ain't moving. Don't know nothing about this stuff. But as I started researching and started going to classes, I started finding out about the nature and how wood burns and how it leaves these deposits in the chimney. And I found out it was class 3 creosote. Now, again, this was the early 80s. And at that time, there was a couple of chemicals on the market. I never heard of ACS at this point, but I think that Creosote was on the market at this time. I'm not sure about when it was first formed, and you may know that factor. But I started hearing about this and hearing about these chemicals. So as I went into this, what we started doing was recommending to consumers that they use this chemical. Now, it did not clean the chimney, but what it did was it treated that creosote and turned it into something that could be swept. It took the class 3 creosote and turned it into a class 2 and a class 1 type of creosote. So, Stuart, that's where I need your expertise in this, because there are certain minerals in these materials that cause this creosote to change its composition into a less flammable, and can I say maybe a safer form of creosote? Would you agree with that statement?
Yes.
Okay, and when I say that, it's not going to burn with the velocity of that glazed creosote.
I don't like to use the safe word, Jerry.
I don't like to use, I said safe. It's potentially safer, because that's a word in the chimney business that we really don't like to use, because it's hard to guarantee that safety. So, Stuart, here's my thing to you, and this is my first question, and this is why your expertise is going to be helpful today. What in the world are these minerals? Because as I went through this, I also heard all the old wives' tales, and come to find out, some of them weren't too bad, such as burning tin cans. For what I found out later was that was the zinc that was actually helping to do this. So let's tell them what kind of chemicals, what are we talking about here that will dry this creosote out?
Okay, can I backtrack a minute?
Yes, sir. It's all yours.
Okay, so you gave a absolute great explanation of creosote, but I'd like to add a few things. And the one thing that I'd like to add is that prior to, I believe, 1987, and you would probably know this better than I because you're more up on the codes, but before 1987, the mortar in between the flue tiles inside your chimney used to be able to be just the type of mortar that they used when they were laying up the brick on your chimney. Am I right, Jerry?
You're correct. And actually that changed around 1987 and into 1996 is when we saw the code changes, changing a requirement for non-water soluble refractory that's required today.
Right. And before that, and all the houses made before that, the reason that I bring that up is because those unburned particulates that deposit on the side of the chimney or the flue, when they get wet, they form an acid. And if you don't have non-water soluble refractory cement holding your flue together, they actually eat the mortar in between your joints, and you get cracks, which makes it very unsafe.
Great.
And the other thing that I just wanted to say is that if you have creosote in your chimney, is an unnatural thing. If you could have a fire and keep it at the right temperature, burn the right types of wood, etc., and your system was functioning correctly, you probably wouldn't see large amounts of that. Most people are their own worst enemies. They don't burn seasoned wood, or they don't want to get up in the middle of the night and stoke the fire. So they fill it up and they turn it on what we call low and slow. And low and slow is a creosote generator. The other reasons that you might have creosote is because you have a bunch of dilution air entering your system at different places. And so to touch on what Jerry said earlier, we're going to talk about products that you can use to modify this, but they are not a reason not to have your system inspected by a certified chimney sweep at least once a year, because they may be able to find the reason that you're generating the type of creosote that we're going to talk about getting out of there. Would you agree with that?
I'd agree with that. Let's put it this way, Stuart. You know, you can buy oil treatment and fuel treatment for your car, okay? But at the same time, it doesn't replace that checkup. It doesn't replace that need for an oil change. And this is some of the false security that we're concerned about here, because by the National Fire Protection Association standards, the chimney should be inspected on an annual basis. So as we go through this, we want to try to dispel any rumors. Now, like you said, hey, Jasper, appreciate that. We got Jasper Dringler on. He just said it was like chimney mouthwash. It doesn't prevent you from losing your teeth, you know, when you use that. So Jasper, really great statement. Appreciate you being on here, brother. So go ahead, Stuart, all back to you.
Okay, so to get back to your original question, you were talking about, you know, what type of chemicals do we actually use? So when we talk about Creosote and when we talk about ACS, we actually use different derivatives of magnesium. And when you use an ACS, which is a liquid spray that's sprayed into the firebox and into the fire, what that's going to do is that's going to modify the creosote that you have, and it's going to turn it into that powdery type stage 1 stuff that you're looking for. When you have a really bad buildup of creosote in your appliance, I might recommend that you go with Creosote, which is a little bit tougher. And what Creosote is actually going to do with its magnesium catalyst. Now understand, when you use either one of these products, you have to have a stack temperature in your chimney of at least 300 degrees, because the catalyst doesn't kick in until you get at 300 degrees. So these are not things that you just spray in and then they're magical. They also need to be swept out after they've done their thing. But the Creosote affects creosote a little bit differently. And what it does is it actually changes the characteristics of the way that when you have glazed creosote and it's sticking to the side of your flue tile, the stage 3, really hard stuff. If you've ever had anybody out to clean your chimney, you know they could spend hours in there and they still don't get it out. Well, what Creosote does is it modifies that Creosote and it changes how it reacts with heat. And so it expands and contracts at different rates than your flue tile does, and it'll start falling off, and it'll be easy to take off with a brush. So the ACS will turn it into a char or an ash, and the Creosote will actually kind of screw with the creosote and make so the stuff that you couldn't get off before will now kind of delaminate on the inside of your flue.
Got you covered. Now, as you look at this, I think one of the words you said, and I want to delve into this, you said catalytic action. Do you remember saying that? So
Yes, sir.
What we're talking about in a catalytic action is, and this is if you have a catalytic combustor in your wood stove and a catalytic converter on your car. What catalytics in wood stoves do is it lowers the ignition temperature of those flue gases. Like I talked earlier, normally it takes excess of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit for those moisture and those gases to be burned up in the appliance. But with the catalyst, what we're doing is we're changing the chemical composition of the soot, of the creosote, of the combustion gases, where they will burn at a much lower temperature. So whenever you're talking this causes a catalytic action, that's basically what your product does. Am I correct?
Correct. And while we're talking catalysts, let's talk about that. Most of the stoves now that are EPA certified have a catalytic combustor in them. And if you do have a catalytic combustor in them, when you use either one of these products, you want to make sure for the first 30 minutes that you burn after you apply the products and while you apply the products, that you put that in bypass mode.
Okay, so good. When we say bypass mode, what he's talking about on stoves, and a lot of times you may call it a damper because it opens and closes, but it's actually in the industry, we call this a bypass valve. So what Stuart's advising you to do is when you put the material in there, remember, you've got to get the temperature up in the chimney above 300 degrees. And that means if you got a 2-story house or a 3-story house, you got to maintain that all the way to the top. If it drops below 300 degrees, Stuart, what you're saying is it's not going to do what it's supposed to do. Am I correct?
You're correct.
Okay. So see, this is one of the reasons to get into this. It's a lot of times when I told you about the stove that I ran into some years ago, and in that stove, I had no idea what I was doing. But at those days, stoves were simply slid into fireplaces. There was no connector pipes. Well, if you go looking for a new wood burning appliance today, a reputable dealer or installer is going to recommend that you run a connector pipe from the top of that stove all the way to the top of the chimney. Now, why we're doing this is to reduce the flue size to keep the temperature up. We also, those stainless steel linings, which are usually stainless steel, are wrapped with an insulation. And the reason for this is to keep the flue gas temperatures up. Because one of the things about creosote is if that temperature drops to what's called the dew point, and when I say the dew point, think of it's a day in the fall. You remember those days you go out and the dew is just starting to fall, or today you had frost on your car? Well, this is what's happening in a wood burning chimney system. We are producing moisture up into that chimney. You see, if you look at good wood, and if you have a chimney sweep that comes, he's going to advise you that your wood should have a moisture content between 15 and 25%. That's right, 15 and 25%. But the problem is that moisture is going to be in the exhaust gases going up the chimney from most. So that's why we use this. Now, with the products like Stuart's talking about here, what we're talking about something that actually should be used by a wood burner on a regular basis. Do you agree with that, Stuart?
Right, and different intervals, and I suppose that we'll talk about those at some point.
Right. So what you're going to do is you're going to use this throughout the season. Now, the reason I want to take it there is there's a good product on the market, but it comes to you in the form of a log. It's called the CSL, or the chimney sweeping log. And a lot of people think that I can burn this log and clean the chimney. Well, the CSL has the right materials, but the problem is you don't want to be using a $20 chimney sweeping log every 2 or 3 fires. So with the ACS or the Creosote, it's coming with some. Well, how long would a container? We'll talk about a quart container or the Creosote that's in the squirt type thing. How long should that last an average consumer that's using a wood stove 24 hours a day through the cold weather, Stuart? How long would a quart of ACS last him?
1 quart of ACS would probably last you about a month and a half.
Okay. And I know that because when I was in the retail business and we sold new stoves, we always had a care package. So we always gave the customer a set of leather gloves. We gave them a coal bucket. We gave them a shovel. And we always gave them a bottle of ACS. And we taught them how to use that. In fact, it was part of what they wanted every year. When our technicians came out, they would always say, hey, bring some more of that stuff out. They didn't remember what the name was, but we delivered a lot when we went out for our annual service calls. So remember again, but it's going to be in the way. Stuart, let's tell them again how to apply this. Even if we've said it before, I'd like to say it again for that regular wood burner use. How do they use your products?
Okay, so let's talk about ACS. And
Okay.
ACS.
And let's say this also, so you'll know, ACS is a liquid, Creosote is a powder. So right now we're talking about ACS. And Stuart, I want to deal with this on regular wood burning, not that we found a problem right now. I want to talk about problem finding later, okay?
Okay, so if I were a homeowner and I was using ACS for the first time, the first thing that I would do is I would spray, if I had a wood stove, I would open up the wood stove and I would spray the inside of the wood stove with about 20 squirts of ACS. After that, every time I put wood into the fire, I'd give it 2 or 3 squirts as I put the wood in. Some homeowners prefer to actually treat the wood before they put it into their fireplace or into their wood stove, which is littler known, but it's the process that I use. You can spray the wood down, let it dry on the wood, and when you burn the wood, it'll work. Okay. Now your Creosote, which is your powder, there is no benefit to be gained by using it every time you burn a fire. You're actually wasting it. So with that, it is a very fine powder. It comes in a spray bottle. You spray it up the flue when you do not have a fire. And you shouldn't probably apply that any more than every 2 weeks. And so a bottle of that will end up lasting you, close to 2 months.
Okay, let's say this also. Always open the damper. Okay, the damper is that flappy thing inside your fireplace you open. You may call it the flue. You may be from the South, call it the flute, whatever. But you got to open that flue, right, Stuart?
If you don't, your house will fill up with smoke.
Yeah, and your face, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's for your regular use of this. Okay, now a lot of times you're going to find that you haven't used this as an ongoing addition to your wood burning habits. And we come in and we find that we got a glazed creosote problem. We got class 3 creosote. And then now we're using this to break that creosote down. So what's the recommendation for that to happen?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Jerry.
Okay, so we discovered that we've got class 3 creosote, and someone wants to break this down using the Creosote or using the ACS, and I want to make sure and add the danger of doing this, which it can catch on fire. But this is what we did for a number of years, is we applied the Creosote or the ACS. We used to have applicators to spray the chimney down, and then we would use the fire to heat this up. But there's a real danger here in doing this, which is you can catch the chimney on fire. Stuart, you agree with what I'm saying?
I would agree with you. And if you have a chimney that is severely glazed, it can be a danger to burn a fire in that. And if I were going to use a homeowner grade product on that, I would definitely use the Creosote. The Creosote is the powder, and it is a 4-stage powder. One of the stages in the powder is an industrial fire inhibitor. So it can reduce the chances that you will have a fire. There is no such additive in the ACH, which is liquid spray. If I had a really bad creosote buildup in my flue, I might consider calling a professional and using a professional product like PCR.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because this has been an ongoing issue for a number of years. And chimney sweeps, technicians, installers have pulled their hair out with this. So back 4 years ago, 5 years ago, Stuart, when you started PCR, his Saver Systems came out with what was called PCR, which is poultice creosote remover. And this material has pretty well been very widely accepted within the chimney service industry. Now with this, what they're doing is, remember, it is a poultice. So I'm going to let Stuart tell you about, this is not a product that you're going to buy off Amazon to use yourself. Am I correct, Stuart?
You will not.
Okay, you're going to need to go, because the thing is, this is a chemical. This requires certain tooling. It requires training. It requires a special applicator and other things. So as you're going through this, in order to have this done, you're going to need to reach out and have a professional chimney technician in your market area come in and use this product. So Stuart, tell them about PCR. Why did this come into play, and how does it work?
So I was actually involved in the naming of that product, and when we called it poultice creosote remover, I just assumed everybody knew what a poultice was. But I've since polled a lot of people, and you'd be surprised how many people don't know what a poultice is, Jerry.
You get a little bit, you're showing your age on that one, bud.
Yeah, I'm showing my age on that, but I would say to you, to the people that are listening to this podcast, that there's a good possibility that the only reason that you're sitting here and listening to it is because there was a poultice. Mm-hmm. And back in the old days, if you hurt yourself, say you cut yourself You couldn't go down to CVS and buy something to make sure you didn't get an infection. And so what they would do is they would make a poultice, which would be a wet compress. They'd use herbs, roots, leaves, and they'd get it wet and they'd pack it onto your wound and then they'd wrap it. And then as the poultice dried, it would pull out all the infection. Then they'd throw it away and they'd start again and they just keep doing it. So that's the way a poultice works. A poultice goes on wet, absorbs something, and then is designed to be removed. And that's what the poultice creosote remover is. Basically, they're going to have a bucket of this material. They'll mix it with water. They'll put a specially made foam applicator made to fit your chimney at the base of your chimney. They'll pour this on top of it. They'll crank it up using a winch, and it'll coat the inside of your chimney with about 1/4 inch of this stuff. It will immediately melt all your creosote, and then it will draw the creosote into itself, and it will dry. And when it dries, it looks a lot like the skin on an alligator. Half of it will fall down your chimney to start with, and the rest of it will be easily removed by regular sweeping. This is the reason why you need to have a professional do it. The advantage to that is that this can remove a dangerous creosote condition where you wouldn't want to have a fire in your system very quickly. It takes about 2 days for the poultice to dry, and then it's easily removed. And when you get done, your chimney looks like it did when they laid it up. So it's truly kind of a miracle product. But the problem is we use some pretty heavy chemicals to get this thing done. And so this is not something that the average homeowner would want to be messing around with.
Right. And we're going to be using gloves because different people have different reaction to this chemical. So what Saver Systems found out, they want to advise you to use proper protective gear. Your installer, your technician is probably going to be gloved up. He's probably going to have a Tyvek suit on. He's going to be protecting his skin, his goggles, and everything else. But the other side coin is there's no effect in the home. There's nothing in this that would affect the resident of the home as long as they stay away from that fireplace while he's doing it. Would that be correct, Stuart?
Yeah, there is no smell that in the home or anything like that. No noxious odors or anything. Okay. All of this is confined to the flue, which is above the firebox and above the smoke chamber.
Okay. Does it require heat to activate this product?
It does not.
It does not. So this could be used in extremely cold. Is there a certain temperature range? Like when we get up in the northern states, is there certain times of the year that it will not work? Will it work at any temperature that's going to be encountered?
If you have an exterior chimney, meaning that you can see the brick on the side of your chimney all the way up the side of your house, instead of an internal chimney where it's sticking through the middle of your roof somewhere, you may have to put a small heater in the firebox to stop it from freezing before it dries. But other than that, there really are no temperature restrictions.
Okay, so we got a guy that joined us as one of your applicators. His name's Lee Roth in Houston, Texas, at Lord's Chimney. And he just put in the chat bar where it's great. So that's what we need. The chat bar is there, guys. Love to hear your chats. We're hoping they all come through. So the whole purpose of this is we're not on here today to educate chimney sweeps. We are wanting to share this information with consumers across America. And we highly encourage you, feel free to share these broadcasts on your social pages to get them out there. Because like I said, there's all kinds of stories that I can tell you about this, because I was telling Stuart earlier today, Stuart, had you ever heard of WI5? And Stuart said, no, I never heard of that. And I said, well, I got to tell you about WI5. So what it was, there was a company back in the 80s by the name of Webster Industries. And I'm kind of telling my age in this because I'm Stuart, you probably never heard of Webster's Industries, have you?
Never.
Okay, they used to make a chimney sweeping product similar to Creosote, and it was put in. The owner of the company was Gary Webster. So Gary knew this was a big problem, and Gary came out with a product by the name of WI5. And WI5 was a liquid. And what we did was we had to have this applicator, which was 2 tanks that you wore on your back. One of them for air to power this, and the other was for the chemical that Gary had made. So what we had a sprayer. We dropped down the chimney, we pumped that sprayer up, and we sprayed that stuff. Well, I used this product one time, and luckily for me, when I did, it was on a lakefront property because I sprayed this stuff, and when I did, I got it all over me. And I went and dived in that lake fully clothed to get that stuff. It was burning there. Okay, here we go. We've got a couple of comments. David Stewart in Oklahoma said PCR is the best creosote mitigation product to come on the market since sweeps have been around. So take that as a compliment. Ron Clark, also at a retail operation up in the Northeast, said, hi, Jerry and Stuart. Nice job, because I know you're not seeing the comments like I see them here, Stuart. So appreciate you guys being on here. Remember, sharing is caring, guys. Help us get the word out to your customers. Feel free to share the Fireplace Show in your local market. Now, again, this is directed at consumers. We want to give you helpful information that can help you. In my business, so you know what I do, I am a coach and trainer full-time, been doing this for 10 years. But what I also do is I review a lot of communication. And one of the Facebook forums, Stuart, that I've been on lately is one by the name of Wood Heat. And what inspired this today was when I watch and read Wood Heat, some of the things in the home recipes, can we just simply say they're a little bit out there? So my purpose in doing this today and why I wanted you on was to give information on that. So again, these active ingredients, Stuart, as we talked, you said magnesium. I think whenever we talked, we also talked about zinc having an effect. We talked about potassium. And potassium, you'll hear an old wives' tale. Throw your potato peelings in there. Well, actually, it is potassium, and it can have an effect. But it's not the prescription strength that we got from Saver Systems, right? You're going to get a little potassium. And then you also said baking soda. Well, did you say baking soda when we talked earlier today?
I said that Creosote is a 4-stage powder, and one of the powders, and I'm glad you brought that up because I want to talk to people. It's sodium bicarbonate, but we have used an industrial version of it in Creosote. And the way your chimney works in the winter, you've got the heat of the fire, and it's cooler on the top, and you have the flow. Okay, and it's called and that's called stack or draft. In the South, a lot of times what happens in the summer is that you get temperature inversion because it's hot outside and it's cold in your house, and air comes down your chimney and it comes into your house. And if you have creosote buildup, sometimes you can have what we call a stinky chimney. Are you with me there, Jerry?
Yes, sir. That's a negative pressure issue. Train on that all the time.
Well, it's a lot more common in the South than it is any place else. But I will say that at the end of the burning season, if you get yourself some Creosote and you coat your chimney really well, even though you're not burning it. And I know that we've talked about you have to have a stack temperature to make it work. Okay. But during the summer, if you have a stinky chimney, if you coat your chimney with it, one of the, the women out there, and I don't want to be sexist, so they're men too, but we put open bottles of baking soda in our refrigerator to suck up all the odors from the food that's mingling around in there. Well, the same thing can happen in your chimney. If you've got a stinky chimney, and at the end of the year, when you close down your burning thing, you get that temperature inversion and you get that smell in your house, you can coat your chimney with Creosote and it will deodorize it. And the cool thing that we found is that in a lot of cases, it will actually modify the creosote in there. And so then before you start burning again, just have your chimney swept and then the creosote will come out.
Right. So you guys know, I got a future episode coming out, and it's going to be on negative pressure issues, why chimneys stink. So when you listen to that, like Stuart said, I'm from North Carolina, but it's a big, big issue where we got stinky chimneys. And what it is, it's a flow reversal or negative pressure, and it's getting worse and worse. And the problem here is, and we'll talk about this as we get later in shows, is the health risk from an what Stuart called an inversion, and I'm going to call negative pressure that's bringing air into your home through your chimney. So we're going to be talking about that on later episodes. So
hey, Jerry,
again, yes,
real quick, Jerry.
sure.
I did actually turn on my comments. I didn't realize that I could, and I did. And I see a comment from Jim Burston.
Yes.
And he's in the UK, and he says that Creosote and PCR are available there, and he'd like to use them. However, there's no training there. So, Jim, take down this number, 800-860-6327, and hit extension 105. That'll come right to my office, or you can talk to any of my tech people there, and we'll be happy to turn you on to some instruction on how to use Creosote and PCR. And I do think we have a couple of videos on some of those.
Good. So you're seeing the comments now. Great. Because I was going to ask you about them. Now, I also want you to look because Corey Taylor Flowers, he's a chimney sweep in Ohio, is saying, I've heard burning an aluminum can help with glazing. Is there anything in aluminum? Because I've always associated zinc, but I don't think it's in the aluminum can. So is there anything in aluminum that would change the composition of creosote?
So I believe that there is. It's in smaller amounts. And we believe that magnesium is the one. We use magnesium and manganese, depending on which one of our products you're using. But I believe aluminum cans help also. Besides, they're just cool to watch melt.
Yeah. Now I've got some more comments coming here, some more users of the product. One here's my friend Larry Cookingham from Hudson Valley Chimney. And this is what Larry's saying, because some of these comments are on the various Facebook presentation pages. So
Okay.
Larry said the following: we use PCR all the time. An awesome product. When we show the customer what it looks like when it's removed, they are very impressed. Thank you. So like I said, that's a lot of this comments. You guys coming in, you know, I got to figure this system out of comments because I'm getting those off. I'm monitoring some of the Facebook pages too. So again, we're talking to consumers. So there's several things we've talked about here. We've talked about the chemicals. Again, Stuart, let's review. Why do we got 300 degrees to make it work? Tell us more about that.
Because that's the stack temperature that it takes for the catalyst to work.
Okay. So under 300 degrees, and this is going to be one of the problems, which is a lot of chimneys cool as it goes up. So getting that temperature to the top. Now, I also want to add this. If you have glazed creosote, if you have class 3 creosote, there's a reason for it. One could be your burning habits. It could be the quality of the fuel that you're using, but it could also be the size of the chimney and too much room for the smoke and the gases to roll around in that venting system. I'm going to tell you a little bit about combustion processes. In years past, in the chimney and venting and hearth industry, we've taught that there was 3 phases of combustion of wood. Number 1 is the drying action. When you started burning wood in the appliance, the first thing happens is we're driving the moisture out. That's called the drying stages. And the more energy that you expend in drying, the less you're going to get into your home. The second stage used to be called pyrolysis. Today it's called vaporization. And what this is where we are turning this fuel into a different form and transitioning it into charcoal. And the third phase under the old way of combustion process was called charcoaling. Now, in the last few years, through research and through the various associations and technical foundations and manuals that are being printed that I've worked on as a consultant, this has now changed to 4 stages of combustion. And today is, the first one is, when we're having combustion is moisture vaporization. Remember, the old one was drying off, so we've changed this to vaporization of the moisture. In other words, again, we're using that energy to drive that moisture away. Now, you've probably always been advised to season your wood. And see, if you're not using seasoned wood, what you're doing is you're wasting that energy to drive that moisture out of there. And if you're not driving, and what's happening is that moisture is going out. Stuart, you agree it's going up in that chimney and coating that chimney, and it looks like almost like it's raining in there. If you could actually put your head inside of a chimney while it was using, you're probably going to see water running down the inside of that flue system. The next is called vaporization of the hydrocarbons. Now, what the hydrocarbons are, that is the actual makeup of the material where we are vaporizing those. The third thing is the gas, paper, ignition, and combustion. That's the third stage of combustion today. And the fourth stage is char burning. Now, in order for combustion to properly occur, it takes three factors. It takes fuel, it takes heat, and it takes oxygen. And see, one of the problems is when we put a wood-burning stove in, we have cut that oxygen down, which compromises the ability for proper combustion. And this is why we have these problems. So what you need to do is, number one, and we'll tell you exactly, you need your system inspected on an annual basis. And it needs to be inspected by a trained technician. And I'm going to give Stuart a compliment now because Stuart is also a member of the board of directors of the National Chimney Sweep Guild. It was my honor. It was my pleasure. I actually served this 6 years as president of that association. So what the National Chimney Sweep Guild is doing, and earlier Jasper Dringler was making a comment here. He is actually the president of the National Chimney Sweep Guild these days. So what the NCSG, which is a short for it, is, they are trying to spread the word across America. So what you've got to do is get a skilled technician, and to do that, there are several different certifying agencies out there that you can call on. So you'll know we have some, and I'm just going to name them here. This is no support or no rundown of anyone, but you've got the Chimney Safety Institute of America. You can locate trained technicians there that are certified at csia.org. You also have what's called certified chimney professionals, and that can also be located on the internet. And another place that you can go for expertise in installations, not chimney sweeping, is the National Fireplace Institute, and they have a certification for wood burning installers, for gas installers, for pellet installers, and all those things, and have a master hearth certification. So the key thing is, and a chimney sweep today, if he comes to you, he's doing much more than just sweeping your chimney. What you're paying this what you're paying this person for is their expertise and their ability to look at your chimney, to make recommendations for your appliance to perform better, to perform safer, and also to put less pollutants into the atmosphere. Listen, folks, I've been training chimney professionals for over 35 years across America. For the last 10 years, this has been my full-time occupation. This is what I do. I work with chimney sweeps across America. I do all kinds of training. I do it on a virtual, I do live, and this is what we're trying to do. But the key thing in this show is to get you to understand safe wood burning. See, years ago, the National Chimney Sweep Guild had a tagline that we use. And I think maybe we need to go back and use it. And that is, don't make an ash out of yourself. Now, earlier, I had to turn my screen off because I kept turning me red. We don't know why. But if you notice, Stuart, did you notice all those stockings hung with care on that earlier?
Yeah, now it just looks green.
Right, it's just look great. It's a true green screen right now. Okay, we got to figure out what's going on. We weren't going to stop the show, but this is what you want to be aware of. It's Christmas time. Make sure that those stockings are hung with care, but also make sure they're not hung too close to that fire. I also want to give you this warning today. Where do you put your ashes? And this is a delicate thing, folks. There was nothing more heart-wrenching than to read a news story. And a couple years ago, right around Christmas, I woke up one morning and looked at the news and heard through the news that children in a family had perished in Stamford, Connecticut. And Stuart, this came because they put their ashes from their fireplace in a cardboard box inside of the home. and we know what happened. Yes.
They look like they're out, but they're not.
Right. And I told the story last time about whenever I was, whenever I had caught my wife's vacuum cleaner on years ago before I knew what I was doing. Let me tell you about this. Here's another little good story, because what the guy do is, and Stuart, Jim Burston asked if you would give him the number again, please. So would you please repeat that phone number for Jim?
Here we go, Jim. 1-800-860-6327 and hit extension 105. You'll come right to my office.
There you go. Call Stuart. Tell him he promised you he'd get that there. If he doesn't do it, you tell him you're going to tell Jerry on it if you don't. Okay. So anyway, like I said, you got to remember. So let me tell you about my first chimney. Stuart, ever tell you I had a chimney fire?
No.
Years ago. I knew nothing about chimneys. I had a brother-in-law that was building homemade wood stoves. Okay. So my brother-in-law and my wife decided that I needed a wood stove insert in my fireplace. So he comes over and puts this monstrosity in my fireplace and starts burning wood, and would start burning wood. Well, went on a couple months, Stuart, and Super Bowl Sunday was here. Now, this is a little bit after Christmas, ain't it?
It is.
So what I'd done a little earlier, I threw my Christmas tree outside. But what I decided was, I need to get a fire going. I might as well use up some of that Christmas tree for kindling. So I went out there and broke a couple of those limbs off, come in and put them in the stove. Started my fire up. Sat back watching the football game, Stuart. Don't even remember who was playing. But it was a sunny day. All of a sudden, it got dark. It got dark. And I couldn't see no sunlight in my backyard. And the reason I couldn't was my backyard was filled up with the thickest, blackest smoke you can imagine. But it gets worse, Stuart, because the next thing I was a volunteer fireman. The next thing you got to do is I had to call all my buddies to come to my house to put out my chimney fire. Okay. You understand? So again, Scott McCain tells me I got to be able to tell stories. So that's a story to make you understand. That's what's happened to me. And later on one night, Stuart, I was reading the Mother Earth News, sitting in a print shop where I work, and opened up and saw a page in there that said, "Be a chimney sweep." And that's no lie. That's how it's going. Okay. And Ron Clark said, if this calls for consumers, you now may be getting calls from them. Well, Ron, if we do, I'm just going to notify them to go locally, because ain't who I had to work with. But that's the whole thing, guys. I don't sell stoves. I don't sweep chimneys. I don't do any of these services. But what I do is I train a lot of great people around the country. I've been doing it for years, and that's our mission here at CBC Success Group. So, Stuart, anything you want to add into this?
Well, I just want to thank you for having me on today, and I want to encourage your homeowners that might have some of these problems in their chimney to try out some of these products, see what they do for you. I want to emphasize again, like you said, it is it's not an exchange for having your chimney inspected. Have it inspected, and especially if you have creosote in there and you get the creosote out, you have a professional chimney sweep come in, clean it, and look at it. He may be able to find the reason that you're creating creosote in the beginning.
That's it. So, Ron Clark just posted, he said he was talking about you getting the phone calls, not me, since you gave out the phone number. So everybody in America may be calling Stuart about information there. We don't know. So, hey, what can we say? So anyway, here's what I want to say. I want to tell you that I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate you giving us this time. I don't know how Stuart feels. To be honest with you, Stuart, we've had a lot of watchers in this. A lot of people are communicating with this. This is a regular show that we're going to be live streaming from our studios here in Concord, North Carolina. I did one last Sunday. It was about gas logs. My plan is we'll probably be doing these twice a week and bringing different subject matter experts on like Stuart. So that's what this is all about. This is to build information to educate the consumers. And it looks like we're going outside the country too, Stuart. I feel really good about that. So if this is a helpful show to you, please consider sharing this on your social media. You can use this to build up your authority, your expertise in your market areas. And with that, my name is Jerry Isenhour. My company is CBC Success Group. And if we can help you turn your business dreams into your realities, please reach out to us at any time. We would truly love to talk to you.